good. We're still working on the same objective from yesterday, so we're talking about major Civil War battles and turning points. And this is kind of a turning point. It's not a battle because it's a speech. So this is the Emancipation Proclamation. Clearly you can see that on the screen. And it was given, basically they say that it was given after the Battle of Antietam, which if you remember there was actually another battle after Antietam. So it was actually a few months after the fact, but it was given in that location. And the purpose of this speech was to free the slaves. Now, I'm going to read this out loud to you, and I want you, as we're reading it together, I want you to kind of pick out words that you understand so that we can make sense of what this is actually saying, because back in 1863, they spoke a little bit differently than we do now. So, that on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall then thenceforward and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons, or any of them, in any efforts they may make for their actual freedom. Now, very, very wordy, and I'm just going to tell you, this is only one paragraph out of the entire speech, and almost every paragraph says some version of this. So, he was very wordy when he said this, and I already told you the point is to free the slaves. That's what the point of this speech was. But, which slaves?
The ones in the South. Seceded states.
The ones that are in rebellion. So the states that seceded from the Union are the slaves, or the slaves that live in the states who seceded from the Union are the ones that he's trying to set free. What about Missouri? Or Kentucky, or Maryland, where this is actually being given? The speech was given in Maryland, which was a slave state that didn't secede. What about those slaves?
They were still in slavery.
They were still in slavery. Why? That is an excellent question. Kaylin.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Because he wanted, because when the slaves would come out of slavery, they'd fight with the Union against the South.
Okay, so and there's actually another little part in here that I didn't include, but that is a very good point. He wants the slaves in the South to basically move out of the South and come and join the Union cause. Drew.
And he didn't let the slaves be free in those states because he didn't want those states to rebel, right?
Okay, that's another really good point. If he freed the slaves in the states that didn't secede from the Union, he might risk making them angry and turning against them. Good. Aaron.
As soon as the North got rid of slaves in some of the states, did those slaves turn over and get paid as soon as they became free? Or did it happen over a long period of time?
Do you mean in the North or in the South?
The North.
It happened over a long period of time. Slavery just wasn't as necessary in the North, and so anybody who moved up there who was a former slave found paid work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln after the Battle of Antietam to officially free the slaves, but did it really officially free the slaves?
No.
Okay, and another problem here, he's freeing the slaves in the states that are rebelling against the Union. Do they recognize Abraham Lincoln's authority as president?
No.
Jefferson.
Anybody see a problem with that?
Yeah, it's going to make them more angry.
It's going to make them more angry. Who does this man think he is freeing our slaves when he's not even our president? So lots of problems with the Emancipation Proclamation, and it did not, in fact, officially free the slaves. It was more of a strategy, was it you, Kaylin, that said to get the slaves to move up to the Union and fight for the Union cause? That was really more what the Emancipation Proclamation was about. So this would be considered a turning point. So in your notes, if you want to just write down Emancipation Proclamation, put a little star by it. All right. Yes.
Do you think it was right of Abraham Lincoln to do that? To say to let the slaves just in the ceded states? Because yeah.
I think that it is the fact that that's what he did and the way that he did it is very telling of his motivations. And technically, if you want to get into like the real politics of it, his declaration here was not even really constitutional. As president, he doesn't have that power. So if you wanted to go really in depth, we could argue that the Emancipation Proclamation not only was not really effective, but it was unconstitutional. Then I would say that yes, that it is kind of wrong. Like he didn't have that power.
So did they leave? Did they end up leaving?
Some of them did once they got word of it, because remember this is happening in Maryland, and it's got to travel from Maryland all the way down into the South, like into Georgia and Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama. So it took a while for news to spread. But once they realized that, hey, the Union government is going to support our freedom, then some of them did try to go north. All right, so back to our big long list of battles. Chancellorsville. This is an important battle for a couple of reasons. First, you can see that we have yet another Union general. This is our third one so far. We went from McClellan to Burnside. Now we are to General Hooker. So the Union just cannot make up their mind who they want to command their Union forces here. So we're on a third general who officially takes his position during the Battle of Chancellorsville. And he is trying to come up with this great strategy to win this battle, but he gets trapped. Because if you remember, the Southern generals were just a little bit superior to the Union generals. And so General Lee and General Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, they come up with this trap. They set a trap for the Union forces, and it works because the Union loses the battle. They have to hightail it out of there. They retreat. But it is a very, very costly victory for the South because during this battle, their famous Stonewall Jackson is shot. Now, it's one thing to be shot. You can recover from a gunshot, but he did not. He had his arm amputated, and he eventually died. So the Battle of Chancellorsville was important because it was a Confederate victory, but it was really kind of a loss on their part, too, because they lost one of their greatest generals. Yes?
But he didn't get shot in the battle. He was riding back to their camp and the guy shot him.
That's a good point. And you say a guy shot them.
Well,
Shot
the
him.
guard for the camp shot him thinking that he was...
Right, so he got shot by his own man, basically. I mean, it was an accident, and I mean, who wants to be that guy that accidentally shot and killed Stonewall Jackson? But that's what friendly fire means, so that was my way of kind of convincing it for the slideshow. He was shot by his own army, basically. And like Aaron said, it was a guard, and it was a completely just horrible mistake. So the Battle of Chancellorsville was a Confederate victory, but they lost one of their greatest generals. So, if you will, we're going to do what we did yesterday, where we write down the battles and we mark who won, which one. So, Chancellorsville, we are going to put a little mark by the South. Except I'm going to change that to a frowny face because they won, but it was kind of sad. So there we go. All right, Vicksburg. Anybody heard of the Battle of Vicksburg? This is kind of a turning point in the war. So if you've ever really learned about the Civil War, you probably learned about the Battle of Vicksburg. And it is important because Vicksburg is over in the west. It's in Mississippi. So, I mean, not west to us because we're really close to Mississippi, but compared to where a lot of the other fighting happened over in Virginia, it is west. And remember who was the general, the Union general who's pretty much in charge of the West? Grant. He is the one who's leading the armies in the West pretty much. Now, he's still not the overall Union general yet, but he is leading them to victory in the West. So, Vicksburg was a fort on the Mississippi River, and it was the last major Southern fort, the last Confederate fort, and so it's going to be really important for them to take over this fort, because then that would basically mean that the South had fallen in the western part. Now, they're still going to be fighting over in Virginia and Atlanta, close to the East Coast, but in the west, the war is about to be over. So Grant takes his troops, and they kind of sneak up. Like, they just do it really quickly and quietly where nobody can see them. And the guys in Vicksburg wake up the next morning, and oh my gosh, they're surrounded and they can't get out. That's what a siege is, basically. And so they just surround this fort so that nobody can get in or out, no supplies can get in or out, until they're eventually just forced to give up and surrender. And so when that happens, the West has fallen. The Civil War in the western part of the Confederacy is over. And so that is why it is one of the major turning points in the war. So we are quickly shifting from the west to the east. So that's going to make it easier for the Union to fight because they're not having to focus on two different fronts anymore. So, since Vicksburg fell and it was a Confederate fort, where are we going to put our mark? North. Vicksburg was won by the North. Yes?
Did the Confederate even like try to fight back because they like were like basically surrounded and they surrendered, but
After 2
oh
months of
yeah, never mind.
2 months.
That's a long
That's a
time.
long time. So yeah, they're not just, giving up, but it's going to be difficult because if they waste all their supplies and their food and energy fighting, then they're just going to have to end up giving up faster. Yes?
Is the blue marks the camp?
The blue marks, you mean the ones kind of surrounding this area here? That's where the Union forces came in and surrounded, because the fort is right there on the river, so they surrounded them so that they were trapped. Does that make sense? All right. Lots of birds. There's Fredericksburg, Vicksburg, Gettysburg. Gettysburg, not in the west, not even in the south. Where is it?
Pennsylvania.
It's in Pennsylvania, thank you, which is in the north. So this is one of the only battles that was ever fought in the Union territory. And the reason that it was fought in the Union territory was because the South had a plan. They thought if they could push far enough north and kind of invade the Union, that they would be able to convince Britain to come and help their cause. That was their last hope, because remember, they didn't have as many people, they didn't have as much supplies as the North did. So they are running very, very low here, and they know that they need outside help, and if they don't get it, then they're probably going to end up losing the overall war. So their plan is to convince Britain to come and help them by invading the North and proving that they, actually still have a shot at winning here. So the Confederate army starts marching north, but they only get as far as Pennsylvania. And that's really not very far, and this is actually in southern Pennsylvania, so they really don't make a whole lot of headway there because they are stopped by the Union forces. And Gettysburg is basically the location that they fought at. So they fight and they fight and they fight and they fight really hard because this means something really important for the Confederates. If they lose this battle, then they are basically losing hope of outside help. And if without outside help, they realize that they are probably not going to be able to win this war. And so at Gettysburg, when they are forced to retreat, they're kind of feeling defeated. So remember the battles of Bull Run, those were like morale boosters. This is kind of the opposite of that. They are not feeling too good about themselves when they have to retreat at Gettysburg. Yes?
How did they march all the way up to Pennsylvania? Like, because Pennsylvania is like a little bit, there's like some states before Pennsylvania and the North, so did they just like march through the states?
Well, they're moving basically from Virginia to Pennsylvania, and all they have to go through there is Maryland, which is really not very big. So if we were looking at it on a map, it would look like probably about this much room that they actually marched. All right, so, and somebody mentioned earlier the Gettysburg Address. Everybody has heard of the Gettysburg Address. Has anybody read the Gettysburg Address? You have? Fantastic. It is short. It's very, very short. And all it was Lincoln just coming to this location where so many people had fought and died and saying, you know what, we have hope. Even though this is a tragic event, even though our country is divided right now, we still have hope that one day we will be united and we will be a great country once again. That was basically the sentiment of the Gettysburg Address. So, on our chart here, Gettysburg, who gets the victory? The North. All right, we're going to talk about two battles at once because this one to me is just a little comical. Like I imagine it almost like cartoon people moving across a map. Yes.
I went and saw the Chattanooga battleground.
Did you? Was it cool?
Well, most of it was in the woods, and the guy that was with us said that most of the battle went through the woods, but there was a road that went through the battleground. You know how they have the fences that are edges?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sides were that, and the north was on the right and the south was on the left.
Oh, okay. Neat. All right, so Chattanooga and Chickamauga. Chickamauga is in Georgia. I should know that. Just a little bit south. They're very, very close to each other. And again, like I said, to me, when I read about how these battles went down, it's kind of funny to me. It's not funny because it's war, but basically what happened was Union forces chased the Confederate forces to Chickamauga, and the Confederate turn around and basically defeat them. And so the Confederate forces, who are victorious at Chickamauga, turn around and chase the Union back to Chattanooga, and then they lose because more Union troops came and reinforced them. So two battles that happened right next to each other. Confederate won one, the Union won the other, and so really it kind of tied it up right there. They're basically just chasing each other back and forth between these two locations. All right, so Chickamauga is whose victory? South, and Chattanooga is in northern victory. So we are going to smiley face here and smiley face there. Still tied up. Anybody notice that? Even though the South's supplies and people and energy is running low, it is still just about tied up. The Union has one battle that they've won more than the South. All right. We are coming to the end of the war. It's almost over. This is kind of a sad part of the war, though. I mean, it's all sad when one country is, fighting within itself. But this part, has anybody ever seen or read Gone with the Wind? I actually haven't seen the movie, but I have read the book several times, and I like it a lot. And in the book, it's set during the Civil War, and Scarlett O'Hara is in Atlanta when this event happens. And so when you read about it, you kind of see it from a Southern perspective, which is an interesting perspective, because when you study it, you usually see it from the Northern perspective, because the victors always get to write the history books. So they are trying to wrap this up quickly. We are in 1864, so we are almost done here. General Sherman is a Union general who is basically sent to try to capture the rest of the South, and we're talking specifically about the state of Georgia. So he goes, and his first goal is to capture Atlanta. And he doesn't just want to capture it and make the city surrender. He wants to completely destroy it. He is sending a message to the South saying, if you do not end this war quickly, if you don't surrender, then we are going to basically destroy everything in our path. And that's what he does. So when he takes Atlanta, he doesn't just come in and invade. He goes in and burns it to the ground, basically. Yes?
It said in the book while I was reading that all the women and children fled, and then he followed them.
Well, see, that's the thing. After he captured Atlanta, he didn't stay in Atlanta. He marched all the way to the ocean. There's a coastal city called Savannah, Georgia, and he's going from Atlanta to Savannah, and anybody who went that route, he's basically following them. And on his way to the sea, anything that he wanted or his men wanted, they took. If they saw anybody who was trying to oppose them, they killed them and burned their properties and just basically destroyed everything in their path, just because they're trying to send a message to the South. Drew.
You think that was a good idea? Because now the South is going to be winning in.
Well, I mean, what are they going to do, though? They're running out of manpower. They're trying to send a message saying that if we know that you are running out, you are running on empty, and if you don't give up, we're just going to destroy everything. Now, there's another reason why this is maybe not a good idea, because what is the ultimate goal of the Union? Kaylin.
They want to reunite, and so there is just going to be like this like big place that's like no one can live there until they like rebuild everything.
Right. The ultimate goal here is that the Union wants to reunite the country. So they want the South to be a part of the United States again. But if they are destroying the South, then they, in their own minds, have to be destroying their own country. So at the end of the war, they're going to have this entire region that has to be rebuilt. And so that is why it may not have been the best idea. Now, it was kind of an effective strategy because the people in Georgia that experienced Sherman's march to the sea realized that, oh my goodness, he means business, and they kind of have to, they may not have sided with the Union, certainly not because they're going to be mad at them, but they were probably starting to doubt the Confederacy and whether they actually had a chance of winning. All right, so that happened in 1864, kind of towards the end. We are now in April 1865. We're very, very close to the end. And remember, what was one of the main parts of the Anaconda Plan? They wanted to capture Richmond, the Confederate capital. Because if you capture the capital, then the government falls apart, and everything that is supported by the government is also going to fall apart. So, in 1865, finally Grant has been named overall general of the Union forces because he wrapped up all of his battles in the West, and he moves back east, and he is successful in capturing the Confederate capital of Richmond. Now, when they capture the capital, the Confederate government does, of course, fall apart. They have to leave. They don't have a place to actually govern anymore. Their command center has been destroyed, basically. And so the Confederacy is here about to fall apart. Aaron.
So what's so important about the McLean's home that they stopped at?
The what?
The McLean's home?
I don't know. I didn't read that.
It said that they got into a courthouse where he dismounted in front of the McLean home.
That's just the home they signed.
Yeah,
up for.
that's just the location.
And now it's important because that's where they signed it.
That's just where they signed it. They didn't pick it for any particular reason necessarily.
Isn't that
They
where it
just
started?
saw a random home and they went in there and signed it.
Yes, basically. Drew.
Isn't that the same house that they started the war in?
No, where did the war start?
Fort Sumter.
Fort Sumter.
Like where they did their war?
Well, that's where the Confederates started bombarding Fort Sumter, which was, at that time, a Union base that just, unfortunately, was located in South Carolina. But that's where the war officially started. All right, so Richmond has been captured, and like Aaron was saying, at Appomattox Courthouse, they meet. Lee surrenders. General Lee surrenders to General Grant. They realize that they cannot fight anymore, and that, I mean, at this point, we're 5 years into a war. Their homes are basically destroyed. What do they have to fight for anymore? They're running low on people, they're running low on supplies. They did not successfully get outside help. They don't have really any chance of continuing this war anymore unless they want to just be completely destroyed. So, at Appomattox Courthouse in July of 1865, they sign a treaty. And we will talk about a little bit tomorrow, not tomorrow, because tomorrow's Saturday. On Monday, we will talk about the plans that happened after the surrender to basically reinstate the South as part of the country.